Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to it. It's Hump Day. That's right, middle of the week. Downhill slide to Firearms Friday from here. We could see it. We could smell it. It's almost time. It's almost time. We're getting there. Don't get too far ahead of us, though. We have got a full boat of guests today. We got a lot of stuff to start talking about. We are going to be covering this morning. We're going to be talking about the fair tax. The fair tax. Not the fair maiden, the fair tax, as put forward by our friend Chris Story, the man from Homer. He's going to come in and give us an update. We're going to talk for the full hour about what it is, where it's going, why it makes sense, not just for the KPB, although we can start with it here, but why this should be something that goes on in every part of the state, and what's happening with it, what's going on, and what is the status of that big project. We're going to go over that with Chris Story here in just a moment. He's waiting in the wings right now. Then in hour 2, we're going to spend the full hour with State Senator Mike Shower for the Shower Hour of Power. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. I'm excited about it. It's a big show for this beautiful hump day. So I figure we should probably get started and just jump right in. After I mention the fact, of course, if you'd like to help support the show and you want to be part of the Cool Kids Club, you can always join the Common Sense Corps. That's the little thing here in the center. Just go to MichaelDukesShow.com and click on Join the Corps. And for as little as a cup of coffee a month, you can help support the show and put shoes on my kids' feet, and beer in my mug, coffee in my cup, however you want to look at it, whatever you feel good about. Go check it out. You get access to the private Facebook page and more. All right. So that being said, I think we're now ready. We're now ready to do it and get into it with our friend, the one, the only, the man from Homer, Chris Story, who normally comes in to be that positivity guru, the Tony Robbins of Alaska. But today, he's a rabble rouser. He's a troublemaker. He's out there shaking up the pillars of government. People are like, how could this guy be around? Good morning, my friend. How are you?
Excellent, Michael. And I have a confession to make. So I don't know if should we put it in here? Yeah. You want to insert this at the quarter hour? You tell me when, but I have a confession and an apology to make. Not to you, but
Well, I mean, confession is good for the soul, and we might as well get it out of the way because
let's do it now. So you've got a great team of people around the entire state that are part of your Common Sense Corps, your 6 a.m. club. Your listeners are fantastic. All right. That said, one of them is Assemblywoman Barbara Haney out of Fairbanks. And she said early on in this Fair Act tax reform, Chris, you ain't gonna, she didn't say it like that, but I would like to impute a Southern accent. You ain't gonna be able to pass this at the borough level. And I was like, oh, well, we're gonna try. Thanks. That's great. Good advice. Thank you. We're gonna try. And she was 100% correct. So a wonderful assemblyman named James Baisden heard you and I talking about this, heard my show where I was talking about this Fair Tax Act, Fair Tax Reform, and he said, "Hey, I want to help. I want to be part of this." So between James, myself, and another guy called Michael Jones, we put together an ordinance, and that draft ordinance that would have created what you and I are going to spend this time talking about was flatlined. It was DOA, borough attorney, knocked it down, swatted it out like King Kong on a top of the Empire State Building, swatting at a little bi-wing plane. And it was just over before it even started at the borough level because of Title 29. Now, my interpretation of that had been heretofore that, look, Title 29 states they must assess your property at fair market value as of January 1 to protect you from the government, to protect you from an overreaching, overzealous assessor, and to make sure that we're not over assessing, number one. Number two, we have control over our taxable value because we have a difference between assessed value and taxable value. And in my mind, I was bifurcating the two and saying, we may not be able to affect the assessed value, but we can control the taxable value. But
right.
Truth be told, Title 29 only allows for two exemptions: senior and primary residents, and of course, people with disabilities and all that. But it's going to be stable. Barbara was 2,000% correct. So here we are. That's where we are today. This is going to be like herding cats, but we can do it. We are going to have to tackle this at a statewide level.
Like herding cats with a shotgun. So yeah, that's going to be problematic. We know that in California, where where you kind of took a lot of inspiration for this Fair Tax Act with their Prop 13, we know there it had to be passed. It was a citizens initiative, wasn't it? Wasn't it a groundswell
it was,
thing?
Proposition. Yeah. Hence Prop 13. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that even, and I don't even know, is that even possible in the state of Alaska? Is that a piece of law that the people can change themselves? I mean, what's the process here?
Yeah, I believe so. And we're getting, some legal advice on this, but yes, at this stage of the game, I don't think there's another choice other than to make it a people's proposition that would change the Title 29, which dictates how boroughs and municipalities tax you and I. And so to lay the groundwork, just going backward for just a minute, I woke up on November 6th, had this epiphany, this realization that Kamala Harris had been resoundingly rejected. Just look at the map where you can see the red versus blue. It was resoundingly a rejection of Kamala Harris's campaign. I mean, resoundingly across the country, coast to coast, except for big city pockets. All right. That said, one of the planks of her campaign was to begin taxing unrealized gains in the financial markets. And even her most ardent supporters, like that jughead Mark Cuban, were saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous. That's never going to happen. I mean, you can't do that." And so on November 6th, I realized, wait a minute, that's exactly what we do on our property every single day, but not at a federal level, at a state level, and locally realized we're taxing unearned gains. We're taxing your paper profit as though you've realized it, but you haven't. And so, I mean, ultimately, we could even go a little further and say, look, property rights are violated every single time you are charged or assessed a property tax, period. Fundamentally, it's already a violation of your property rights. True ownership implies you have control. And without that control, if in other words, you must pay endlessly to keep it, you don't actually really own it. It is a violation of our constitutionally protected private property rights. But you and I both know we're never going to unring that bell. We're not going to be able to undo the system by which we've all been living here since stage one. So, okay, can we make it more fair? And that's where I'd like to, using their language, reimagine property taxes. I'd like to just reimagine it to a point where we have, similar to California, your taxable value is based on what you paid for the property. Now, in California, it can go up 2% a year. I'd like it to go up 0% a year, because even 2% a year is taxation on unrealized gains. But we'll discuss that later. And the other piece of it is, just real quickly, is that senior citizens, once you reach 65, your primary residence, you pay zero tax on for the rest of your life and or ownership of that property. And that we then will reassess properties upon sale, but not familial transfer. And so if you pass it down to your family or you sell it to your child or whatever, it doesn't create a reset that property tax would remain at the level with which you paid for the property. And a piece of this has to be similar to Prop 13 in California. We have to roll back. We can't just start today. We can't just say, okay, well, these increased assessed values through the roof. That's just what's going to hold the line. I was talking to somebody yesterday whose property went to 1.6 million. And it was just a handful of years ago, it was somewhere in the $700,000 assessed value range. So we have to go back to, my opinion, 2018. We have to go back before the pre-pandemic ramp up.
Because that was where we really started to see a lot of these assessed values start to change exponentially in some cases.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of people started having. I mean, this coincides with some assessor problems from not just on the Cape, but around the state. There have been some assessor problems as well. So going back to 2018 definitely makes the most sense.
I think it's the only fair way to handle this is we have to pick. If it's arbitrary, fine. Pick 2019. Wyoming is looking at a statewide measure as well right now, and it's actually a piece of legislation. It's not a measure. It's a piece of legislation. I think it's HB 282 or something like that in their house. And I don't know whether they'll pass it or not, but they're picking 2019. From early on to 2018. I'll go either way, but it needs to be pre-pandemic for sure. Again, coming full circle, this is the way we tax ourselves now, and it really, I think it's the right way to say it. You're taxing your neighbor. We're taxing ourselves, because this is very much local, on the imaginary. Yesterday was tax day, right? Okay, around the country. Can you imagine if you're taxed on an imputed, you could have earned, you're actually worth more than you didn't work 5 days a week, but you could have. We're going to tax you as though you did. I mean, people would just lose their minds. Or if their 401ks, they had to pay a tax on, or any other paper asset that they're holding, the value of your gold has risen such that we're going to tax you on that gain. People would just flip their lids, but yet we do it every day. We tax ourselves on realized gains. And we're just, something you remind people of as well is that the people that go to Juneau or that go to your assembly or your city council or whatever, your municipality event, they're just neighbors, more or less volunteering. I know the legislature gets paid, pretty well, but still, it's more or less a volunteer position. It's not something that I think we need to get the pitchforks and torches. I think it's just about conversation and entering this conversation through the aspect that we both understand we can make this more fair. We're not talking about no tax. We're just talking about a fair tax and resetting the board a little bit.
So, nobody likes taxes. Even, you mentioned that tax day was yesterday, which is ironic because Tax Freedom Day, which is the day that you basically have now paid for all the taxes that you pay. I mean, all different kinds of taxes that you pay, including federal, state, local taxes, national. Then you take your income and you figure it out. The projected Tax Freedom Day for this year is June the 10th. So we paid our taxes, but this year we're going to have to work half the year essentially to be able to pay for all of our taxes at all the various levels, which is the latest that it's ever been, by the way. This is according to the Adam Smith Institute. And so if we could find a way, especially when it's a tax on unrealized gains, as we've come to discover and understand about property taxes, and just the insidiousness of property taxes, as you said, where you'll never be able to own your own property, this becomes more important than ever.
Yeah. And I mean, I come to this with, okay, is this self-serving because I own rental properties and investment properties and I pay a lot of property tax every year? No, it's not self-serving at all. I have friends and clients actually that own a tremendous number of more properties. But more than anything, for 25 years now, I've been engaged in the conversation by and between individuals and the assessor's office every single year, to a point where I can tell you the process is arbitrary and capricious. I can tell you there's human errors involved. There's human emotions and ego involved at the assessor's level. I'm not talking about the current assessor, but in general, it's human nature. There's subjectivity and there's coercion. And when you put all those things together, there's going to be some winners and there's going to be some losers. I had somebody file an appeal this year, and they called me afterwards, and they were just thrilled that they felt like they had won. And I said, well, tell me about what happened. Well, I talked them through it and this and that, and they gave me some relief. They gave you some relief. Interesting. That just shows you if that phone call can bring some quote unquote relief to the person who's willing to pay either a minimum of 100 to file an appeal, but it goes up with the value, which is also arbitrary and definitely repressive, and definitely designed to keep you from appealing. If that can happen, that tells you with a phone call, this is an arbitrary and capricious process. It is not based in science. It's not rooted in fact. And mass appraisal is difficult. I don't envy the job. No, thank you. But at the same time, that just brings this to the forefront that something's wrong. And the only people that can fix it is you and I. We're going to have to do the unthinkable. Gather signatures, learn how to create a coalition and an organization of very independent people. And it's not going to be easy, but it's going to happen and we will win.
Chris Story is our guest. We're talking about the fair tax and the plight of it right now, the mechanics. And we've learned now that we've got to take it to a new level. We're going to continue to talk about this with Chris Story in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
And we are back in the break. Chris Story is our guest. We're talking about the fair tax. It's kind of sad, Chris, that this is the direction that we have to go, but also it's kind of good news in some ways, because this means that maybe everybody can participate in this and we could get it fixed at a higher level. And so that'll prevent the boroughs from trying to double back on us. You know what I mean? Trying to pick us apart down the road.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. And, one of my big trepidations about going statewide was Anchorage, the biggest voting bloc we've got, and they have the most to lose relative to this. And I'm using air quotes around the word lose. They have the most maybe leverage. The municipality has leverage against them by saying, you have no sales tax, folks. You vote for this, you institute this kind of a measure, and we're going to have no choice but to get a sales tax on the books. And I don't think people of Anchorage are psychologically ready for that. So we have to, I think, just come at this from a fundamental moralistic debate and argument. This is amoral to tax your grandmother, yourself, to tax your mother, your father, your uncle, anybody out of their own home. That the threat of foreclosure is so amoral. And this idea of paying tax on paper gains, on unrealized gains, is also amoral and should be considered. I think it is unconstitutional. But I once, when I was 18, I was a salesman at a water purification company, and one of our customers was coming in pretty regularly, and we had to talk, and he convinced me that income tax was unconstitutional and that we do not have to. I mean, he really convinced me. I was coming home at night telling Tiffany about this. I'm like, okay, we're going to stop paying. Anyway, one day I asked him, I said, by the way, I forgot to ask you, what do you do? He said, well, I used to own a construction company, but the IRS has seized all of my assets, took my home. I'm now divorced, and I live in a small apartment over there, and I'm continuing to fight them. And I said, how long have you been fighting them? Oh, the last 15 years. And I said, okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out. Thank you. We're done. I'm not going to try to defy gravity here.
Yeah. Standing on your moral high ground is great, but And that's the thing. You can't unpickle a pickle. Once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's hard to put it back in. And it could be wrong and everything else, but everybody has become so accustomed to it. And now you've got whole entities that are dependent on that kind of revenue stream. There's going to be pushback, right? I mean, you mentioned Anchorage. I mean, this would be good for every property owner in Anchorage. They'd be excited about it. But then they'd have to realize that they would probably then have to offset that in some other way, whether it's with a city sales tax or something else. But it's still.
So can we convince them? Yeah, it's going to be difficult. Can we convince them they have a spending problem, not an income problem?
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that this money, Michael, if we do this fair tax reform, the money doesn't disappear. In other words, just because it doesn't go to the central coffers doesn't mean it leaves your community.
Right.
It'll stay in your community. I'm convinced it'll be spent hyper local, and it'll ricochet around the community and the economy multiple times, far greater than the government who makes poor decisions. Like our city in Homer just recently sent 650,000 of your tax dollars to the firm of Agnew Beck to hold our hand and finalize us during the comprehensive plan review. It's like, I'm sorry, that's a waste of money. We have a spending problem, not an income problem.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. And we know, I mean, every economist out there, I think, is, all in agreement, maybe not on the number, the multiplier, but we all know that money in the private economy turns multiple times compared to money that's in the public economy that's spent by the government. Money spent in private hands turns 5, 6, 7 times in the economy. Money turned in the government hands usually turns less than once. So we know that that money going back into the community will be a boon to the private economy or to the public, the private sector. And that would be great. But the most important thing to me is not forcing people out of their homes, to actually be able to own your property instead of renting it from the government, which is just infuriating. Like I said, it's a pet peeve of mine and has been since I was very, very young when I first understood it and understood the concept of it and was like, before I was even a property owner, I just get incensed. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right, we're back. Chris Story is our guest. We're talking about the fair tax. This concept initially came about, and Chris wanted to try and apply it at the borough level in the Kenai Peninsula Borough. He had the help of Assembly Member James Baisden, and they were trying to figure out how to make this work. But as it turns out, that's not actually possible. It's something that's going to be has to be changed at a state level. And that means that we're going to have to do this ourselves in a citizens initiative. And I guess not surprising, since California, which is this is based on Proposition 13, had to do essentially the same things. And so, Chris, what is the process now? Where are we at, and what's the reaction so far? Just let's walk me through this here.
Okay, let's put a pin in what's the process for just a second.
Okay.
You mentioned California. I just got back from California. Tiffany and I went to Carmel by the Sea, which is on the Monterey Peninsula, and the home of John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts and their infamous writings and so forth. Anyway, so we're there at Carmel by the Sea, which is just beautiful. And I shared this whole story yesterday on my show. If you missed it, you can catch the podcast at ilovehomeralaska.com. Anyway, beautiful. I mean, this is an artist's community, an architectural dream of a community on one of the most beautiful coastlines of America, maybe the world. Monterey. It is absolutely gorgeous here, Carmel by the Sea. Asked a lot of Tiffany's family and other people that I met there what they thought of having lived under the auspices of Proposition 13 all of these years. And Tiffany's family goes back in Carmel generations, close to 100 years. And I asked them what they think about. What do you think about the impracticality? How does it actually work for you guys? And every single person said, if not for Proposition 13, we would not be here. Period. We'd have been dead. And I'll tell you why. One of her cousins is a hardwood flooring contractor, and he just got a job. He just won a bid to put in flooring into this home that's being built. They spent $30 million on the land, Michael. $30 million to acquire 3/4 of an acre. Can you imagine what fair market value is going to be if they were assessing on fair market value when that home is finished or completed? Brad Pitt just bought a $40 million home there. Homes are trading at 22 and 18 and 30 million. Can you imagine what the quote unquote fair market value assessed value would be on people that live there locally? Unaffordable. Absolutely.
Right.
Would have already been taxed out of their homes 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Right.
But for this act, those people wouldn't have a stake in their own community, which they built. And you tell me, how is that fair?
Well, I mean,
All right,
especially. Well, I mean, let's dwell on that for a second, especially
please.
in families who are multi-generational. I mean, like you said, Tiffany's family's been there for 100 years. I can't imagine that they spent $1 million on their homes down there when they were building these things, right? I mean, 60, 70, 80 years ago, Carmel was always nice, I'm sure, but probably, they may have spent $30 or $40 or $50,000 on some of those. Dave Becker, the owner of the stations here, was talking about growing up in California, and one of his first houses that he and his wife bought down there, he said they paid, I think he said they paid $110,000 for it, which was a lot of money back then. He said, but the last time he went through there and they took a look at the house again, and then they looked it up on Zillow, and it was over $1 million. I mean, that was only 40 years ago, 45 years ago. So if you're talking about a family that goes back 100 years, I guarantee you that there had been no way they would have been priced right out of the market if their property was at fair assessed market value and 3/4 of an acre cost $30 million just for the bare land. I mean, how would you be able to even afford that if you're only making $150,000 a year?
You're talking about the average person now being asked to pay $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 a month in property taxes. No. So people would have left. And there's these special pockets around the country, in my opinion, and around the world, but around the country that are just amazing little places and hamlets similar to Homer, for example. And one of them is called Cedar Key in the Gulf of Mexico in Florida, and in central Florida. Anyway, I've grown up going there. I set my book, Making a Man there. I love this little island. Whenever we go back, I'll talk to people, as I always do, and I'll talk to the locals, and none of them are living on the island anymore. They've been taxed off. And Levy County in Florida actually has a measure to help prevent the rate of rise beyond a certain percent a year. I forget what it is, but that they had to institute that is just to say, hey, we need to slow. It's like a sea anchor, but it's just become unaffordable to live there. And that's what I'm worried about here. It's an erosion of liberty. It's arbitrary, it's capricious, the whole process, but it's regressive by its nature, property tax, let alone if you try to push to taxing paper gains or paper profit and unrealized gains. It's regressive because it doesn't take into consideration consumption, production, or one's ability to pay. So it is the most regressive way to tax yourselves. And it's a great way to tax yourself out of your own property. So at this stage of the game, we're trying to put together and build a coalition. That's going to take a little time. Meanwhile, I'm collecting names and emails and putting together a listserv, essentially a Substack that will keep us apprised. Even I said people yesterday on my show, even if you hate this idea, still text me your name, your first name only, and your email address at 907-299-7653. I'll put you on the list. You'll get email updates. Even if you're like Bill Smith, who took me to task in the Homer News and the Peninsula Clarion, and the title of his piece was Fair Tax. Oh my. Well, you look up Bill, and he put himself into the public square, so I don't mind talking about this. Look up his property. He pays zero tax, but doesn't want other senior citizens who maybe have property that's worth more than his to also pay. Why should he pay zero? But your grandmother or your mother who has a home with a view and they've maintained it impeccably over the years. Why should they have to pay some aggressive property tax because they've chosen a little differently than you? I want every senior like Bill to be able to enjoy zero property tax on their primary residence. And I think that is only fair. So send me your first name and your email, and I'll put you on the listserv. I mean, that's a small start to just start collecting those of us that feel this way. Even if we're disparate politically, you may be like me, you may be a MAGA Trump guy, or you may be a Bernie Sanders semi-socialist, or you may be an independent, or you may be whatever. Let's work together on this, because this truly is bipartisan. This is Alaska first.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely insane that this is where we're at. And by the way, this is what has helped to grow government across the country over the years, is this ever escalating house, property value idea. They could take more and more and they spend it on more and more. And of course, that just leads them to needing more and more. And so now we're seeing these valuations change. And we've seen the same thing, like I mentioned earlier. It's a separate issue, but it's connected. There have been reports over the last 4 or 5 years of assessors in different communities. All of a sudden, the assessments have just gone crazy, out of control. And, things like nonprofits now being, charged for parts of their property that they'd never been charged for before. And what it looks like from the outside, and they'll tell you, of course, it's not, but what it looks like from the outside is a money grab, because we're desperate to get more revenue. And again, that's because we're trying to feed the beast. We need to starve the beast. And a fringe benefit of this would be to keep government in its lane and make it justify what it has to do. If they need more money, they'll have to come to the people and say, we need more money, and then convince us as to why, instead of essentially holding people hostages for their homes, right? I mean, that's essentially what they're doing.
Yeah. You're familiar with Parkinson's law. Essentially, the time, the scope of work will expand to the time allotted for its completion. Okay, same thing applies for government spending. The scope, the amount of monies needed to fund the government will expand to your ability to fund it, or their ability to bond it or borrow it, always on the credit card of the people. Yeah. It's just like the no matter what you think about that bond initiative that just failed at the borough level for South Peninsula Hospital. It was a $32 million bond, and it failed. They being the Kenai Peninsula Borough, the assembly, and the mayor were attempting to use your properties, to mortgage your properties, to finance a project that they wanted to see move forward on a $180 million a year business. And they wanted to use your property to mortgage it. So these kinds of things need to be taken into consideration. For example, there is a survey going around right now asking, and I assume this is either borough funded or the South Peninsula Hospital is funding it, and they're asking people if they would vote for the bond if it had been this way. What if it was this? Would you support a bond if? And so we will be asked again to mortgage our properties, and that's going to fine. That's what the propositions are for. Put it on the ballot, let the people speak and decide. But on the basis of just your annualized tax, watching it go and grow, go up and grow every single year without any sort of lever of control to me, it's social suicide. We are going to lose our way of life here. And how dare we do that to the people that have built this community? Somebody said to me, and this person's in a position of power, and I'm not going to repeat their name because it was a private conversation. But this person said to me, when I first drove into Homer, I thought, this is the ugliest town I've ever been in. And I thought, how dare you? How dare you? And they weren't talking about the view. They were talking about the on Pioneer Avenue. And I said, how dare you? Right. When I was a child, before I even got here, it was a muddy rut, and people were staking their claim and trying to build something out of nothing. And where we are today, and this person, I think, moved here about 9 years ago, who said this. And again, somebody that you would be shocked if I told you, and I might tell you off air, but I can't say it here, but you'd be shocked. And you say, what? But I'm just looking at that and saying, there are pioneers, people that they bled, sweat, and had tears over developing what you and I take for granted today, which is called a paved road, a community water system, an electric grid that may not be perfect, but man, it is incredible. Yeah, we're going to lose it once in a while, and storm. This is Alaska, but it's incredible now that you can go flick the switch and boom. We take these things for granted to a point where like, no, real people built this, and now your suggestion is that they can't afford their property tax, they can sell. Screw you.
Screw. Screw.
Yeah,
exactly. Screw and you. Those two words direct. And I find that ironic that somebody would say that to you after moving here 8-9 years ago, because the first time I ever came to Homer, and I've told this story a million times, but I'll tell it one more time. The first time I ever came to Homer, we got here. We weren't here 90 minutes. We'd driven around town. We'd gone down Pioneer. We'd driven out to the Spit. And I told Terry, I said, I love this place. I just love the whole feel, the vibe, the environment, the quaint little town. I said, I would love to retire here. And she laughed at me. She thought, she goes, that's retire. And then like 3 hours later, she goes, you know what?
You might use that word.
Yeah. Well, I did. And she said, you know what? You might be right. She said, I think this would be cool. And so we were trying to figure out how to get down here, not necessarily even to retire, but just to get here ahead of time. And this is it. I mean, again, I don't know who the numbskull was that said it, but it's right. They don't, all they see is the pink meat in the tray. They don't understand all the blood, sweat, and tears that went in at the slaughterhouse to make that meat, to raise the cow and do all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of person that is. And they don't understand. And they'd be the first one to say, sure, tax everybody. Again, not surprising to me. Chris Story is our guest. We're going to continue. So up next is now the mechanics of this. He's got a Substack. If you want to get on board and figure this out, just text your name and your email address to 907-299-7653. Chris will get it. He'll put you on the list. And we'll start getting some information. So one final segment dead ahead. Don't go anywhere. Chris Story, our guest. Yeah, this is somebody just said, oh man, why I'm glad you didn't start this on Monday because I'm infuriated. You just ruined the rest of my week. We're not here to ruin the rest of your week. We're here to give you a solution. And that solution is a fair tax ballot measure. And that's what we need to be doing here. We're going to talk about this more when we return. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Chris Story is our guest. Some interesting comments in the chat room. Ron says, I don't even want to improve my property because I'm just penalized through higher taxes for doing it. I mean, I agree. It is definitely, it's regressive, and it forces you to make a decision on, should I invest in my property? Should I make it better, make it more livable? Because they're just going to tax me on it anyway. It's just going to cost me more. Yeah, I think you were the one that was told me the story about putting the chip and seal on your driveway, right? And the next thing you know, you got a $20,000 increase on your tax bill or something. It's that kind of thing.
I appealed. Well, yeah, and I appealed my taxes last year on I think six or seven, and I almost never appeal, but last year I was like too far. And my home in one of those properties that I appealed on, and they said, okay, well, we want to come in your house. And I said, no, you don't need to come in my house. I'm not telling you that I own a hunk of junk. Fine, it's a nice house. I'm not telling you that there's cracks here in the floor and you need to come. No, I'm not going to walk you through and do the whole display of shame and tell you what's wrong. And no, I am telling you, you have overassessed me. I did my own comparable analysis. Here's what I'm telling you it's worth. And that's based in fact. And they came up to the property, did a walk around. I gave him permission to come onto the property and just to do the walk around. And he came back and he said, okay, we're not going to approve any deduction on your house. We're not going to reduce your house, but we did notice you paved your driveway. So we'll be getting that next year. We don't want to do it this year because we don't want it to look punitive. So we'll add that on next year. And a nice fence yard, and you put that nice rock wall in. And it's like, oh man, Them
Yeah.
fighting words that really upset me. It's like how dare you?
I don't want it to be.
Disincentivizes,
I don't want it to be punitive, but let me list all the things that we're about to smack down on you next year.
Yeah,
bitch.
Yeah,
that's what they're saying to you.
Oh,
right?
man,
yeah. That's. I mean, it really.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, let me just slap you around a little bit. And again, that is so because I mean that's how dude. I told the story the other day. I said when I was renovating my house in North Pole before I moved down here, I did a ton of work to my house because we were, I wanted to update it, and then we were going to sell. I mean, after we decided to move, we decided to move in the middle of the renovation down to Anchorage because we got that job offer, and I had a big detached garage next to my house. It was like a 3-car big workshop, really nice, but it was kind of a crappy old building. It had a leaky roof. It was bad. I had a huge blue tarp over the top of it because it was leaking. The roof was bad. So I went ahead and had the whole roof redone in steel. It really nice, looked really good. And then I put the blue tarp back over the top of it for a year because it was going to be a year before so I put the blue tarp back on top of it because, I mean, they were going to ding me hard for it. I mean, why would I not do, and that's the kind of stuff people in other places around the state, half of them don't have siding on the house because they're afraid of what their assessment will go up. They've got the siding sticking in a stack under a tarp somewhere, but they don't want to put it up. It's ridiculous that we live in fear that the government's going to come and take more from us if we improve our lives. And that is what just infuriates me about this whole process.
Indeed. Yeah, no, it definitely disincentivizes, and we ought to be going the other way. And well, for example, there's a part of the community that's going to be undergoing some pretty significant road construction and water and sewer and so forth. And I was telling one of the property owners who's going to be incredibly impacted for their business all summer as this is going on. I said, well, you deserve a tax abatement. Your property taxes need to be abated for a year, the whole year of this reconstruction, because they stand to lose quite a bit of business. But that's not the way it works. We don't offer tax incentives or abatements for people that are providing. Well, we declare that we need affordable housing. Great. Let's structure a tax abatement program where if you'll provide new construction on affordable housing or what have you, that you'll receive a tax incentive. Same thing with people that improve upon their properties. And on the other hand, we'll spend hundreds of thousands, $650,000 creating a fairy tale blueprint of what the community should and could look like through the vision of Agnew back, as I said, and channelizing us. But at the same time, we're not willing to reward people for just improving their own property by offering some sort of a tax incentive.
And using your money to do it. They're going to tell you how to live. They're going to plan your community and tell you how to do it utilizing your money. And if you don't conform to their master plan, well, good luck. They're going to find ways to screw you right through the floor. It's so mad. And Harold, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. If you're worried about the cost, then you can't afford it. That's the dumbest thing you've ever said. I mean, really, if somebody doesn't worry about costs on something, there's something wrong with them. Okay. You need to consider all costs. You always need to do that. That's just, is that just crazy? All right. We gotta jump into this here. We're going to get back to it. One final segment. Chris Story is our guest. Let's get back to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and let's get to it. Here we go. 3, 2.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Anthony in the chat room said, I'm just going to create a printed pattern Tyvek house wrap that looks like logs or bricks or siding or whatever and sell it in Alaska. I'll make a fortune while creating a loophole to keep a house in an unfinished status still look nice and keep everyone's property's taxes at the rock bottom. You could make a mint right there if you did that. Sorry, it's not really finished. I know it looks finished, but it's not. I don't really have siding. That's just pretend. That's a photocopy of siding on my house. Chris Story is our guest. We're talking about the potential now for a ballot initiative for a fair tax, which is modeled after California's Prop 13, which, of course, locks in the property taxes on a piece of property at the point of purchase. And Chris has discovered that it can't be done at the borough level, which is what he was initially trying to do. And so now we're going to have to take this statewide, baby. So, Chris, walk me through the mechanics of this. So how does this work? You're going to have to get an initial petition written. We're going to have to get some signatures. We're going to have to get the initial petition authorized, and then they'll create books for the ballot measure, et cetera, et cetera. Have you got all the details kind of down on this? Walk me through it here.
Keep going. I'm writing these down. No, that's just it. Exactly. You just outlined. I mean, it's really, on the one hand, you can look at this and say, man, this is incredibly complicated. But the truth of it is, I think it's simple. I think it's difficult. And it's going to take time. And I think we all ought to sort of moderate our own expectations and just manage those expectations and say, okay, this could be this fall. If everything, if the stars align, maybe it's on the fall ballot. It very well could be the following year. We can't wait, though, for the legislature. We can't wait for the municipalities or the boroughs or the cities to suggest this. We're going to have to do it ourselves, which means we'll have to come together. And I think the first thing is to just understand the whole, what would this measure do? What would this measure do for our communities, for our long-term stewardship of our own properties, and for our own community's economic well-being? And once we understand the moralistic argument, this idea of not taxing unrealized gains, I think the talking points are much simpler to convey. And I think the debate's won before it even starts relative to nobody, Michael, has once, even Bill Smith, who wrote about this in the paper, both papers on the peninsula, hasn't pushed back on the concept that this is taxation on unrealized gains, that we're taxing paper profits. Nobody's pushed back on that because it's true. It is what we're doing. They're just, anybody who's pushing back on this is just going, so we need the money. We need it. What are we going to do? Well, I think we can choke back the amount of money coming in through our properties, and the economy will be better in your community. And I think we'll be able to help government find another way to continue to provide the services that we all want. I mean, we do want certain levels of services, of course, but we're not talking about no tax. We're talking about fair tax. So if you raise your hand and say, look, I want to know more about this, what we're going to do is in the next week, probably be putting together the structure and looking for a tax captain, if you will, a fair captain in each community, because we need statewide, we need somebody in every community that's willing to be sort of the hub, if you will, in creating spokes in that community. We need a hub. We need somebody to help organize it where you are, and then gather people around you. And so at some point we'll be asking somebody to raise their hand and say, look, we need somebody, in Homer, in Anchor Point, in Soldovia, in Kodiak, in Fairbanks, in Delta Junction, in Fort Greene. We're going to need somebody in each of these places. But first things first, let's get on the same page. Let's get our written talking points. Let's get a measure. I think we can take the draft ordinance that we've already created, put it sort of into the rough terms of what a measure could look like, and then have the same conversation around the state versus a bunch of, 1,000 fires everywhere. One main message, and have that spread like wildfire. And I think we can do it. And that's probably, maybe it's too soon after the LA fires to be using that analogy. I'll come up with a better way to put it.
Right. No. And I agree. I think this would be great. And it will take people in each community, even communities, you mentioned Delta Junction, even communities where they don't assess property value, where they don't have a property tax. I know you guys who are listening in Delta are probably like, wow, this doesn't affect me. Hey, brothers and sisters, why don't you help out the rest of the state? Because one day you may have a tax in Delta. You may, that may be maybe the state comes down and mandates all these places get organized and you're going to have to start paying. Wouldn't it be nice to have a fair tax initiative already set up on the books for that? But you're right. We need a captain in each community who can then spearhead this thing and get it going on. And it can be done. It can be done. The ranked choice voting people were able to get a bunch of signatures with they had minimal funding. And so this is a good opportunity. And I look forward to it. Now, my main question before we're running out of time here, we got about 3 minutes, Chris, but my main question is, if we get this passed the way that you're envisioning it to be written, would it immediately take effect, or would the boroughs have to opt into it? Or would it be, this is state law and this is how you have to do it?
My dream is it is state law and you don't get a choice. Because in other words, you're not winning there and then going, good luck boroughs, good luck people in the cities. No, it needs to become effective upon passing, such that we retroactivate the values back to 2018 assessed values, and that they are stopped in their tracks, and the assessors can do whatever they want relative to assessed value, but the taxable value shall be capped at what you paid for the property at 2018 levels, or what you paid for the properties. And look, part of the newsletter campaign we're going to be doing is talking about how do we handle non-disclosure. We're a non-disclosure state.
Right.
Okay. That's called self-reporting, and we do it every day. It's fine. There's a few things we'll have to overcome, but ultimately I think enough of us just raising our hands saying, look, we want to be part of this. Let's get our ducks in a row, and then let's hit the ground running and manage expectations. Right. If it doesn't happen by the end of this year, it'll happen next year.
And I think this will cross the political divide, because I'm sure that there's many people out there on the left side, the progressive side, who'd be like, wait, you mean I could actually afford to live in my house and have some extra money and be able to do it? I mean, yeah, it may force, and somebody just said, why aren't we talking about cutting? Well, if we start reducing the ability for them to jack your assessments every year, that's a de facto cut. That's a de facto spending cap, because they'll have to live within their means. And like I said before, then they'll have to come back and justify to you why they would, why they need more revenue and everything else. It will make it much more transparent, instead of just automatically putting a gun to your head and saying, pay or we're going to take your house. That's
congratulations. Your home's worth $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Pay up.
I don't care that you paid $300,000 for it. Now it's worth $1 million. Pay or get out. And that's where we're at. All right. Chris Story, one more time. Folks want to get involved. What do they do? How do they text? Give it to me quick.
Text me your first name and email at 907-299-7653. And together we'll put the fair in the tax system, but it's going to take every single one of us, you included. You too, Harold.
Yeah, you too, Harold. Exactly. I'll text you my first name and my email address here right after the show, Chris. Do it. All right, Chris Story, the man from Homer. Thanks for doing this, my friend. Thanks for spearheading this, and keep us up to date. We need to get this on the 26th ballot as quick as we can. Thanks for being part of it today. Hold the line. Folks, we're out of time. Hour 2 dead ahead. Mike Shower. The only people that I could see pushing back, 299-7653. Let me put that in the chat room a third time. You guys can scroll backwards, 299-7653. The only people I could see really pushing back against this, Chris, are the big government types who are afraid that their socialist utopia will be caused to crumble because they don't have enough money of your money to do it all. That's the only people that I can really see pushing back against this. And yet at the same time, they're more than willing to take their exemption and not pay taxes. Bill Smith, I'm looking at you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I think it's a conceptual and a philosophical discussion that is part of this narrative, is that if we can just get on the same page, to your point, we set aside partisan politics. This isn't about left or right. This isn't about, I never met a government program I didn't want to overfund. It's about, is this fair to you and your neighbors? Oh, you can afford your property taxes. Wonderful. That's terrific. What about your neighbor? Do you care about the people that pioneered this great land that are now on a very fixed income, and that our current property tax situation ignores their ability to pay whatsoever? Or we're going to make them individually go in and decry themselves broke and please, beg mercy upon the king and don't take my home and let me get some. No, absolutely not. I'm sorry, but the seniors that have built this community and built our country, built our state, carved out something from nothing, deserve to own their own land free and clear for the rest of their lives after 65. I would do it sooner if we could, but I don't think it's realistic. So let's be realistic about this.
Well,
and not just, fighting the fight, but let's make this worthwhile, and philosophically, morally, we're correct. We're on the right side of history. I guarantee you.
Yeah, no. And again, it will cause, I guarantee you what it will cause. It will cause an explosion in investment in the state, in that private property, in building nicer homes, in using that money that they would have spent on taxes on something else, investing in businesses or creating more jobs or doing whatever. It'll be a boon. It will be a boon. And people have got to see that. They may or may not try, but it's, I mean, this is a great idea, Chris. This is a fantastic idea. And I'm hoping that we can get the traction on it. And like I said, I think it should cross the divide. Everybody should be in favor of this, with the exception of a few, big government types who will just be afraid that their pet project will die. But I love it. I love this idea, and I'm 100% for it. We'll be behind you 100% on this, Chris. We'll be helping you any way we can.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll be back. If you'll have me, I'll be back, and we'll just keep this conversation going.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate you coming on board. Thanks for joining us today, Chris, and sharing this with us. And I guess this is the good news, bad news situation. And the good news is this will be statewide. The bad news is it's going to take some work. It's going to take some work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. We tried the easy button, and it's not going to happen. So we go the Barbara Haney route, and we go statewide.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you calling in.
All right, Michael. Thanks for the hour.
All right.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Chris Story, the man from Homer, joining us this morning to talk about all this stuff. All right. Let me get Mike Showers set up for the thing there. There he is. Let's see if this actually worked. Are you with me, brother?
I am.
Okay, good. Did you listen to the last hour of the show, just out of curiosity, or part of the last hour? Of the
show? I only caught the last little part of it. I didn't catch the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
Just a little bit of that where you guys were talking about the fair tax.
Yeah. Well, it's going to have to be a citizens initiative now, man. That's the news. The news is it's going to have to be a citizens initiative. And I mean, wow. It I think this is big news. Big news. Big news. Are you ready to dive into the madness that is the legislative session? It's been a while.
Ooh, yeah. There's a couple things to talk about.
Yeah.
One or two.
My God, man. I don't know how you guys do it. I really don't, because there would be so many people laying on the floor after I throat punched them. I would never make it down there. Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to put you on hold. We're going to be right back to you. Let me get caught up on some of the chat room stuff. Terry is saying that I should get Bernadette Wilson on to talk about her run for governor, even though she hasn't declared yet. I'll try. I'd love to have Bernadette on. Harold says, complain about taxes until you need a police or fireman to save your bacon. Got it. Oh, nice. That's a great straw man argument, Harold. Great straw man argument. Great one. Because that's not what we were talking about. But you're right. You pay all the taxes, Harold. You do it. You take care of it. Let's see. What else? I don't recall ever being asked if I needed the taxes, to be honest, says Anthony. Yeah. I'm scrolling backwards here. They will never be enough. They will never be satisfied with what they have. That is the nature of government, my friend. In a nutshell, that is the nature of government. They will never be satisfied. Let's see. Jeffrey said, darn, I got distracted by the show. Now I'm going to be late to the salt mines. Sorry, Jeffrey. Sometimes we are able to catch your attention. That's sometimes that's what goes on. Chris says housing costs have gone up. Even a couple with two incomes can't afford to buy a house nowadays. It's cheaper to rent. I mean, that's part of the problem, right? Is that it's so expensive in that regard. Joel says more California policies. I would argue, Joel, that Prop 13 out of California was probably one of the greatest things that came out of California because it came from the people. It didn't come from the California government. It came from the people, and it was a pushback on that Californication. That's what it was about. So, yes, this California policy, I'm 100% in favor of. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite translator and radio stations as well. It's the Michael Duke Show. Also on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble, in case you were wondering. If you want to look at the furry face this morning, you can come in and join us and see the power of the beard. That's what it's all about here. It's Hump Day, middle of the week, downhill slide to Firearms Friday. We just finished up with Chris Story talking about the fair tax and how that initiative, which initially he wanted to be just on the KPB, the Kenai Peninsula Borough, now it turns out it's going to have to actually be a change to state law. And so now we're ginning up to get a statewide ballot measure to change the property tax rules in the state of Alaska to kind of mirror what happened in California with Prop 13, which would lock your property taxes in at the point of purchase. And it's a fantastic idea. I can't say enough how much I support it. And we're going to be talking more about it here in the coming months. I know we're going to do our best to spearhead this across the state. So hopefully folks are listening out there. If you missed it with Chris, you can go back and listen on the podcast, which will be available shortly after the show this morning, and to get all that done. Hour 2, though, it is the shower hour of power. That's right. He used to come on all the time, but now he's too highfalutin for us. He's too highfalutin. He's too busy. He's a man on a mission. It is the Senate Republican caucus leader, State Senator Mike Shower, joins us this morning to talk about all the madness that is going on down in the clown show we call Juneau. He joins us this morning to discuss. Good morning, my friend. How are you?
I am doing well, but you said it. I am so important. There's just so much to do.
Yeah.
That it just can't afford to be on the radio.
Yeah.
Actually, legitimately, somewhat. Yeah, I do have a lot of meetings now I didn't have before.
Yeah.
Some of these morning stuff is true. I actually have to schedule this now to tell the press like, hey, next week on Dukes, Wednesday, 7:00 standard.
Yeah, be there. Make it happen.
I have to blow a meeting off every now and then to do it, but I still need to be on to talk about it. But I just had to laugh, and you said, I'm like, yeah, that's right, man. He's so important. So important.
He's too fancy for us now. He's too fancy now that he's the leader.
Whatever.
Got to give you a hard time, my friend. Look, you've been doing some good work down there, and I appreciate it. I said it earlier. It's like herding cats with a shotgun. I can't imagine it's the easiest job at all, but appreciate you taking the time out to come on here and talk about this. Okay, Mike, the theme of this, if every session had a theme, this year's theme would be, okay, Jack, how do we pay for that? Because that seems to be the biggest problem that we're facing in everything that's going on. How do we pay for that? We got the House passing out bills with no fiscal notes and ways to pay for it. We got them proposing cuts to the governor to say, here's a cut. You got to make this cut. We're not going to tell you where to do it because we're going to give, you're going to have to carry the fire on that, even though that's our job. We got all these things going on. And the bottom line is we're broke. The state of Alaska is broke. There's no way to put a finer point on it. Even with all the shenanigans from last Friday and all that stuff, we still have a $500 million deficit for next year. We've got a $200 million deficit for this year because they got the supplemental budget that we still don't have the money for. But that would be the theme. If there was a theme, the theme is we're broke. How do we pay for all this stuff? I'll let you take the floor from here. I'll just set it up. I set them up, you knock them down. What's going on down there?
Playing T-ball this morning, huh?
Yeah.
Teeing it up for me.
Yeah, trying to.
So, you said what's the theme? I mean, I would say in this order: tax and spend, or really spend and tax, right? So this is a tax and spend legislative session, and I'm guessing the whole 2 years. I don't know how else to describe it, Mike. I mean, look, you have a situation where, as I've highlighted before, and I sent you a picture yesterday, I believe, so you would have it to look at, that if you got the text, just to give you an idea of kind of the current numbers as of about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. It's actually worse because the price of oil has been slipping. And now you're looking at some of the big indexes out there, the market prognosticators who are saying, yeah, we're anticipating in the 50s by next year. So considering that of the UGF budget, 1/3 of our UGF state budget of the taxes we get, royalties, taxes, all of it combined, it's about 1/3 of the budget, and it's been slipping. And we were hanging our hats on about 62. I think they were asking the Senate Majority press conference yesterday about, well, can you make it balance at 65 or 68? And they said maybe. Nobody wants to answer the question because everybody already knows the answer. We can't budget where we are now, right? Because we are in deficit spending. And if you look at that text I sent you yesterday off the whiteboard in my office, one of the things I was pointing out on the left side of it over there was what we used to have. And if you go back to, and I may have said this a few weeks ago, I can't remember, but just because you're asking and we're setting the baseline
right
for the conversation, right? If you go back over the last about 12 years or so, we have had a total of about $30 billion in our savings account. 2019, 2021, if I remember right, we put $4 billion each of those years extra into the corpus of the permanent fund for inflation proof. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. To protect it. It was early. We didn't need as much as we did, but that's what they did. And part of it was taken out of the ERA because there has been this push for some time to turn, basically to get us away from the statutory formula and the fund as it was managed and put us into this thing where you have just one big silo, right? So there's no more ERA or anything else. But be that as it may, there was a point where we had about $30 billion between the height of the CBR SBR in 2013, the height of the ERA in 2018. The total numbers were about $30 billion. Taking away the $8 billion, then that leaves us 22. There's about $6 billion left in them now. And yes, money goes out and in. I'm just talking the aggregate totals over the last 10 to 12 years, last decade plus. And we now have a little under $6 billion left over. So even taking that away, that puts us at $16 billion. Here's my point. Is that sat on the floor yesterday, and it was Wilikowski and I were arguing about this a little bit back and forth, in the sense of he was sponsoring another tax bill, right? And I was opposing the tax bill and my reasons why. And, of course, it's always tough to be when somebody that's sponsoring any kind of bill that you oppose or don't agree with, they get the opening statement, they get the closing statement, right? So whatever you say, they can try to counter everything because they got time to think about it and throw counters. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. But it's like, looking at this, I'm trying to make the point, first of all, that, I have said myself, I will entertain the thought of taxes if it's a part of a comprehensive plan. Like I said before, where people were unfairly hitting Ben Carpenter,
right? Because
they're like, he's pro-tax. No, he never said that, ever. He said he was part of it. He could be a part, if it was part of a comprehensive plan that had a spending cap, set, locked the PFD away so we stopped fighting about it, in the Constitution, had spending reductions, those kinds of things. And then you could look at, any kind of taxes, whether it was a broad-based sales tax or per barrel, any kind of thing to at that point make the math work, and then cap it because you couldn't go beyond it. So there would be stability. That Ben and I were same thing, fiscal policy working group. But he's saying stuff like, well, people say that we have actually, increased government. It's like, we haven't increased government. If you look at it, it's like government may have gone up, by 7% in the last, 10 years, whatever the statement was. But the reality is it's not going up, and we're not bigger than that, because you can look at inflation and it's not there, and it's been flat funded, or in fact, you'd call it a cut. I'm like, it is amazing to me, Michael, that people listen to this kind of reasoning, because if that was the case, if we were living within our budget, explain to me how we spent that extra 16 billion to get us here
right
over the last 10 to 12 years.
Yeah.
Explain to me why you're all complaining about how much tax money we have to raise from the private sector of ours that's barely getting by in Alaska. Talking about, one of the majority members, I believe was Senator Giesler, and income tax is inevitable. We're going to have it. And we had 24 billion extra flowing through the state coffers during COVID, a lot of which we can't even account for. So you're going to tell me that this government hasn't grown. It's not bigger than we can afford for the size of the state. And yet all we're doing is clamoring in the legislature for new taxes. It doesn't add up. Just like the tax bill and our income, right? That the spending we have doesn't add up. The arguments for taxes doesn't add up right now, Michael, because nowhere, you noticed in that entire debate yesterday, if you watched it, I know you didn't, but if you had, nowhere in that conversation was a discussion about reductions, except that when I talked about that as part of the balance, it was, Wielechowski said the same thing they all say all the time. Oh, well, where are you going to cut? That's always the emotional deal. Where are you going to show me right now?
Show me where you're going to cut. Yeah.
Right. No, what we have told you is, in addition to actually saying where you could get cuts, like in Medicaid, work requirements might be nice for the 29-year-old, as Speaker Mike Johnson from the U.S. Congress said. That's the intent of this, is to get the 29-year-old working and off the couch in mom's basement. It's not the single mother of two that's barely getting by. That's what it was created for, not for everybody. When 250,000 something Alaskans, 280, it's a big number. About a third or so or more are on Medicaid, which when Governor Walker said, don't worry, this is going to save us money, it's not going to put many people on it. Are you kidding me? It's like quadrupled. It's absolutely crushing us. And we have lapsing money out there. There's a lot of things that we could look at as reductions. PCNs, I've talked about it. 923 last number I saw, for like $123 million that have been funded but unfilled for like 18 months or more, or some of them 3 or 4 years. My point is, every time they say it, we have looked and said things, but they don't want to acknowledge that. And they refuse to enact something like the Sunset Commission that would require the state to look at ways to bring down programs, cancel programs that no longer work or that are sunsetted, right? Force things to go away, and the legislature would have to act. I guess, Michael, that's the thing that is the theme of this session, is we are spending everything we want, everybody's ideas for all the government spending.
Right.
We don't talk about the private sector at all. There's no focus on the private sector. I heard one of the majority leadership members last week or the week before actually say these words in the press conference. I was speechless. I was watching. I was in the room. My jaw hit the floor. There can be no private sector without the public sector. I was like, what? You just uttered those words? Methinks it doesn't mean what you think it means.
Right.
To say that,
right?
Because that's exactly the opposite. Without the private sector actually creating jobs and wealth and money, there is no public sector. There's nowhere for the government to take money from to sustain itself.
Well, except for in the state of Alaska, they just suck it out. It's a stealth tax. They take it before the private sector ever sees it. So they feel like they're totally insular from it.
Well, isn't that part of the tax thing that's funny? I said it yesterday. I said, tax you, tax here, tax everywhere. I think it's a little green eggs and ham yesterday on the floor, but it's funny, Mike. Senator Myers and I were talking about this, right? Because Senator Kaufman's got the spending cap. Senator Hughes has the Sunset Commission. There's some stuff on the dividend. We got all the parts and pieces out there, but the majority doesn't want to touch it. Won't touch it. Won't bring it up. Won't move these bills. Why? Because that would start to constrain their ability to grow government, so they can promise their constituents, right, money. Because as I've been said before, there is no constituency if you don't spend state dollars. I've been told that multiple times from people. down here. But the taxes that we're talking about, have you noticed? They're all, and it keyed me for the word you just said, they're all stealth taxes. They're all hidden. It's all coming from, the internet, the digitized tax, just the appropriation. That's other states. Actually said, no, it's never going to not one penny of taxes on Alaskans. We're going to get it from other states. So let me get this right. So your argument is we're going to take tax money from other states, and those states are just going to suck it up. Those states aren't going to find a way to get their pound of flesh from those businesses once Alaska takes that tax money, right? No, that's not the way it works. They'll raise taxes on something else. They're going to get their pound of flesh, which means they're going to get the pounds of flesh from the businesses in those other states where the sales are coming from, right? And they're going to get it. And then guess what's going to happen? Because you know what those businesses are going to do? You're right. They're charities. Those businesses are simply going to eat it.
Right.
They're just going to, out of the goodness of their heart, the businesses are going to just take the loss, the profit, and not pass it on to the consumer.
Right. And they forget that. Oh, we're going to put a tax on you. Well, you don't think the consumer's going to pay that tax? You don't think that they're just going to tack on a little more? You don't think that the consumer will be the one that ultimately somebody always pays for it. It's insane. State Senator,
these are hidden taxes. These are hidden taxes. That's all. They're not talking about something that's going to hit Alaskans in the wallet that they have to answer for during campaign season and at the voting box. That's it. These are people don't see. Go for a tax or an income tax. Good luck. Now the people are angry. You notice they're not talking about that.
Yeah.
It's every tax they get without directly having to go to the people and the people having to see it. That's what's happening with these right now.
Well, it's because, again, they don't want to have to justify their spending. If all of a sudden the people started to see it and they started to feel it, then they'd have to justify, well, why are you spending it? And then that asks some very uncomfortable questions of those folks. They don't want it, like you said, they don't want to have their ability to spend and grow government interrupted. All right, we got to go. We're up against the break. State Senator Mike Shower is our guest, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, State Senator Mike Shower is our guest. The Shower Hour of Power continues. Mike, I had that slide up on the screen, that image of your whiteboard up on the screen. So again, just walk me through it here, because it's got the options to fund the state or draw down the savings account, which is the CBR with just under $3 billion in it. You can cut the PFD, or you can reduce spending. Then you go into a history on that same side of the board of what the CBR and the SBR had in them in 2013, $17 billion. The ERA at the height of its time had $13 billion for a combined total of $30 billion between the two accounts. At one point, we took out what was ostensibly inflation proofing, although this was supposed to be pre-done. This is supposed to be prepayment on inflation proofing, but they seem to have forgotten that somewhere along the way, because now they're talking about how we can inflation proof because there's not enough money in the ERA, but they took $8 billion out. And then you mentioned this COVID total, which was $24 billion, which you said we can't even account for. I'd like a little more clarity on that.
Well, you see at the bottom, I have in parentheses there 6. It was 6 plus. All these are plus. What's 400 or 500 million between friends? So if it might have been 17.3 billion in 2013, but it was like 13.6 billion in 20. So plus or minus $1 billion, right? So don't worry too much about that. As like I said, what's billion between friends? But COVID total of that, about 6 billion plus went through the state. In other words, the state got it, and then, as you may remember, in 2020, the only thing that apparently can get us out of session inside of 90 days is a pandemic, right? Because we rushed out of here like, our tails were on fire. And so the money was then pretty much, we abrogated our responsibility as the legislature, and we had no ability to operate remotely because we've never thought that far ahead and put a plan in place, kind of like that military thing where you got booked A, B, C, and D up on the shelf. Which thing are we dealing with? Okay, let's pull out book C and operate. We don't have that. And so that $6 billion plus went through the governor's through the administration and just got doled out all over the place, right? And we had some wonky stuff back then when you look at it, going. I remember one very specific. We broke a lot of it down. Never asked my chief of staff and I looking at it, and one of the things that just sticks in my head was there was like $24,000 given to the trail club in Juneau, Alaska, for like maintaining trails or something. I don't know. I'm like, what does that have to do with COVID at all? For anything? And there were so many things like that. And then below that, you see that 17 billion went direct, plus or minus, to these different organizations. In other words, we didn't even see it. We don't know who got it. We don't know what it was all accounted for, how they spent it. No idea. Mike, and think about it. So tie this together with what Doge is finding out right now. So much money, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars flowing into NGOs. We have no idea. Well, we're starting to get an idea where it's going, to teach something in Palestine, diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia. I mean, we're seeing things you're going, they did what? And how much of that we're now realizing is funneling back into the U.S., into the coffers of politicians and others. Things like being paid and funneled into our own press system to push things that, of course, are left of center agenda items that Marxists and communists and others are giddy about. We're finding out so much of that is just this money's pushed out. And it's back to the same, one of those age-old problems. Like, it is easy to spend other people's money. It's not coming out of your checkbook, so you simply don't care. You get to promise billions and hundreds of billions of dollars to people, and they're quite happy.
Yeah.
We don't have time to go over all of it, but I mean, I've been watching the Doge stuff and the reports. The amount of money and the lack of transparency and accountability and where it's going in some cases is mind-boggling. But we'll finish on the after the breaks. I know you got.
We'll come back to the whiteboard because Kevin says I understated the deficit for this year and for next year because it's closer to $500 million this year. I mean, how we could pass a budget out of the House that is basically it's a bounced check. There's no way to pay for it. Is pretty astonishing. All right, we're going to jump back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do it.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
All right, welcome back to the program. We're continuing now. State Senator Mike Shower is our guest for what we lovingly call the Shower Hour of Power. Mike, last week we saw some machinations go on in the House. I don't know if you want to comment on that kind of thing where they waited for everybody to slip out of town to try and pass a budget. But essentially, they're passing a budget over to the Senate that is, it's a rubber check, essentially. We're going to do all this stuff, but we have no way to pay for it. Now it's in your hands. Good luck, kind of thing. And now I saw the story this morning that the Senate has now advanced a slim capital budget with school maintenance as the focus. But the question is, how is that even constitutional? I mean, according to the Constitution, the capital budget is supposed to be a third of the regular operating budget, and it has been nowhere near that the last couple of years. That's unconstitutional? I mean, give me your thoughts on all this madness.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that concept, Mike. I'm just looking at the same problem. It's like, based on the money available, if we were following that right now, there would be no ERA, there would be no CBR balance, and you have to have a minimum number in there to operate. I've heard it's between 500 million and $1 billion to be able to pay the state's bills on a rotating basis as you have cash flow, in and out, liquid assets, etc. So not to get hung on that number, but some amount you have to operate right on a daily basis during the year. Here's the point: is that based on where we have put ourselves and the size of the government that some people in the coalitions and the Democrats and others keep claiming that we haven't grown state government, you have to explain to me how the government can continue then to suck up more money than we have available. because if the government wasn't growing and they keep telling, well, no, it's inflation and other stuff. Okay.
Well, I mean, wait a second. Wait a second. Let's break that down for a second, because I heard this argument for the first time late last week, I think. This is their new talking point. Their new talking point is, government hasn't grown. I mean, you could look at it and see that we're. So can you? I mean, maybe it's. Can you explain the logic that they're using? I mean, what is the actual art that somehow what we've been spending, even though it's ever increasing amounts of money? I mean, I remember when it was $3.5 billion back in 2014. So in 10 years, we've almost doubled the size of the actual operating budget. But their argument is, no. That's just keeping pace with inflation. And we actually haven't grown government at all.
So when we discuss one of the biggest drivers of the cost increase, there are other things like Medicaid expansion, right? So when they say that we haven't grown it, you can't say that, because they're going to try to say, well, we haven't built more buildings, we haven't hired more people, or created more organization. That's their idea of saying, like you said, different talking point. When the talking point isn't working, they don't acknowledge that, well, maybe that's not, it wasn't the case to begin with. What they do is they find another talking point. And when you defeat that one, or that one no longer holds weight, then they have another one and another one. And they're never going to stop, because they're proponents of government. They want government control. They want government to be the end all be all. It's all about, again, in Juneau, Mike, when you step into this gravitational slipstream that's like a black hole compared to the rest of the state, it's an anomaly, a singularity. It changes. The gravity's different. I don't know. It's the upside down. It's all about the state here for most people. That's their only focus. So we need defined benefits, right? We got to go backwards decades, and let's go to a system that we're still almost $8 billion in debt for, from 2006 when it stopped. And let's go back to that. Yeah, we're in deficit spending. We don't have enough money to feed the government we have as it is now. But let's go back and do that on top of $250 million plus for education. So let's, what's the answer? It's going to be take the PFD. I'm like, so let's hurt 680,000 Alaskans for a very small segment, a few thousand state workers. And that doesn't mean that teachers aren't important. It doesn't mean we don't need competitive wages and we need to take care of our schools, because it's about the kids. It really is. And that's important. It means, though, that we're focusing all of this money that affects everybody else in the private sector economy, and the poor, and the disabled, and the senior citizens on a fixed income. We're going to hurt them in the private sector economy for this slice of the public sector. See, that's the point, Mike, that they will never acknowledge. We're hurting the private sector and most Alaskans for the state government. Go back to defined benefits. That's going to cost us money. I told you I think I said it last time we talked. The Reason Foundation report needs to be blasted far and wide. They said they're assuming a 7.25% return. Our average has been closer to 6, 5.8, 5.9, 6%. That could be as much as $10 to $11 billion over the next 10, 15 years, whatever timeline they were using in the report. So they say, oh, no, it's going to save us money. It's kind of like Medicaid, right? That was going to save us money. It hasn't saved us. It's breaking the bank. So, yes, when we look at stuff, if you want to really talk about the increase has been the contracts for employees. Employees are your biggest expense for the state, right? Like almost a lot of businesses,
right? Oh, and their new ask is just amazing. I don't know if anybody read that article about the new asks that the unions are asking for state employees. Yeah. 25, 31%, 23% increases over, year over year.
And what is the PSA argument? What is it about? It's not about building new schools. It's not about putting more money into the hands of parents and the students themselves, right? Like with backpack funding or correspondence. It's all about the teachers. So we got to retain the teachers. We've got to take care of the teachers. We have to make sure when, by the way, over the last couple decades plus, we've increased education spending by about a third. It's been flat for a few years, but before that, it went up significantly. And a tiny portion of that went to the teachers' salaries. But the administration, the school system grew by leaps and bounds, just like Anchorage. Building more buildings, right? New buildings and new square footage space while their attendance has been dropping. Superintendents, assistants, staff, support staff, all that grew by leaps and bounds. And you add that to the government. So to answer your question, a lot of this has been driven by the cost of the employee portion of this, union contracts, salaries and wages and healthcare, etc. Those things are growing by leaps and bounds. And that's what we have to pay for. Because remember what I said, that, and back to your question on the capital budget, legitimate. That's what we're supposed to do. But if we were doing that, Mike, then you couldn't grow government. And when I say grow, I mean pay for all the stuff that you want to do, from defined benefits to Medicaid for all to whatever your program may be, right? Whatever your thing is. I'm not contending that you shouldn't have inflation proof of wages if possible, like having normal stuff. Businesses will do that too, the private sector, right? CPI, inflation, how the economy's doing. But you know what? There's also this other thing. In the real world, not the world of government accounting, but in the real world, Mike, when the economy contracts, when you have bad times, what do businesses do? Do they go, hey, let's keep on spending, boys? I know that, we're not getting people coming in the door because the economy is kind of tanking right now, and our income is down, right? So, but I'm gonna offer everybody a 20% pay raise and bonuses for all my friends. And we're going to go build a new building, even though, kind of all of our profits have fallen off. So we're going to go leverage everything right now. In the private sector, that's how you go bankrupt. There we go. Okay, boys, austerity measures. We're going to have to cut everybody's pay back from 40 to 25. We're going to, no bonuses this year. We're not going to put money into that new building or buy this widget or do that, because that's how we're going to survive. You know what government does? The state of Alaska does, goes, hey, time's kind of tough right now for everybody out there, and I know you guys are barely hanging on, but hey, we just gave ourselves a 67% pay raise, legislature, last year or so. Remember that one?
Right.
Or, hey, we're going to 20% union wage increases because that's the bargaining units we have right now. So that's the problem, Mike, is it's like the opposite. As opposed to having something that would have tied to like CPI, if you have deflationary, maybe the state government should be deflationary, right? Reducing its spending and cost. Or we have run ourselves to a point where we're going to have to raise taxes. Then you go, maybe we're spending more than we should, right? Or the PFD used to be statutory net income. Then we went to the 50-50. Then we went to and that's in the upper right of the board, by the way, that you put up.
Right.
Then 525, 8614, 98.2, 99.1. Hey, it's going to be $1. Where does that stop? But don't worry, Mike, we're not really wink, growing government. So it depends on your definition. I would agree with that. But the definition really is that we have state workers, and it's getting much, much more expensive. And between all of the benefits and things that we're doing and providing to be competitive, then the cost of all that is going up. And we already had, and I've said this many times on the program, so let's very briefly, just going through the budget for those who we're looking at.
Yep. 3 minutes.
Yes,
3 minutes.
I'll be really fast. I'll just go down the numbers. You can see them. I won't read them. But when you get down to the red numbers, on the right for fiscal 26 at the top of the board, and you go down, the governor had the full statutory PFD. That was the 2.5 billion or so. If you go with the upper right, where I put the numbers about what it cost, the 75-25 PFD was somewhere north of 900 million to do that for the state of, for all Alaskans, right? If you go from the 2.5 million down, then that gets rid of that 1.65 billion. But see, that's how they're balancing the budget, Mike, by taking the PFD out of the private sector and putting it into government. But then you've got to think about other things. The supplemental, which you see over there, which we're going to have. So that's several hundred million. They already said it. If you go with this PSA increase, that's another couple $100 million. And then at the bottom, you see that little tiny note says plus 100 million, and it says going up. We know that every year, and it's worse than that now with the new bargaining contracts for unions and other employees. We had somewhere between $100 to $125 million of increased costs every year for already cooked in the book contract increases. So add it all up, yeah, we're close to $500 million upside down, right, already. And that's before the price of oil was dropping. That when I did this like 2 weeks ago, that was before the oil was dropping off. It gets worse, significantly worse. And yet we still want to spend more. It doesn't match, Mike. And here's the problem. We can't take the pain point.
Right.
We've had this discussion in caucus a lot. The pain point is, oh my gosh, we're in such tough times. We've got to employ austerity measures. We're going to have to cut positions. we're going to have to reduce some services. Not these, troopers are still going to show up.
Cut
right?
positions.
But
They can't even cut a handful of positions to save a mere $1 million for positions that haven't been filled for 2 or 3 years. Because I mean, come on, we got positions that haven't been filled in 10 years that they won't defund. Are you kidding me?
I know. No, I'm not kidding, which is why I'm making the point. When it's time for the private sector to do this, they must to survive. When the government gets into this boat, the government simply reaches out and starts enacting taxes, takes more money, right? Because they always use the word revenue, and I really don't like that word. It makes it sound like we create something and then sell it and get money. No, we are the government. We take money and then we spend it as we see fit. And there are necessary things, infrastructure, right? Stuff that we can't do individually that we've all agreed on. Police, fire, stuff like that. We agree. There will be a government and there's going to be some cost to that, right? But when it's time that the private sector is struggling because the economy is bad, price of oil drops, or a resource economy, those kinds of things, and the private sector has to adjust, the state doesn't. Matter of fact, the state goes the other direction.
Right.
And that at the core is part of our problem. We cannot seem to find the will to reduce spending when we should. Only the private sector.
Well, that's the thing. And spending and cutting the spending has been the number one goal of this program for 25 years. And yet we still have no political will to do the simplest thing, eliminate a handful of positions that have been vacant. And they still say, no soup for you.
It's a slush fund, Mike. You don't want to touch the slush fund, and that's what they are.
Yeah.
For agents.
All right, we're going to continue. State Senator Mike Shower, our guest. I know it doesn't sound like that I kind of let him loose already, but in the next segment, we'll really let him loose and let him steer the boat for a bit, and we'll see what he has to say. State Senator Mike Shower, the Senate Majority Caucus leader. We'll be back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
I guess I should have said the Senate Republican Caucus leader, not Majority Leader. I was just trying to project there. All right, in the break right now, future gubernatorial candidates. Mike Shower joins us to discuss everything. I'm into the danger zone. I'm all about it. I'm all about making.
Why do you think when Michelle's not around? Because you don't have the. That is such a lack of courage, Mr. Dukes, that you refuse to say that in the presence of Michelle. I've said it the last week. I've been saying it and apologizing to her ahead of time. Now I've just dropped the apology because at this point, it's got to be inevitable. Okay. So all kidding aside, just for a second, we were talking yesterday and the day before about how to fix this, because somebody said, okay, so what's the answer? And my answer was, I don't know. I have tried everything that I could think of on this program for the last 25 years to get people to acknowledge that we have a spending problem. And I just don't know. But somebody else came up and said, well, the governor is strong. And he's right. A strong governor. We have in the United States, we probably have the most powerful executive of all the states, and a strong governor who's willing to go in there for a single term, who's willing to acknowledge that they may only be in there for one term. They may even get recalled. But to know that they can go in there, let the chips fall where they may, and make the changes, a single strong governor who could give the direction to the state could make all the difference. Am I wrong? You are right, but we have to acknowledge reality on that battlefield, right? Let's do the Donald Rumsfeld. You go to war with the army you have, not the army you want. So that is absolutely true. The governor has immense power. From vetoes to line item vetoes and things. But let's talk that through for a moment, because you may remember in 2019, Governor Dunleavy's budget had significant reductions of spending, and it was like the earth stopped spinning. We all got thrown off. Gravity ceased to exist, and it was chaos. Dogs living with cats. What was that movie from Ghostbusters? Total chaos. Well, no, it wasn't. It was like $400 and something million. And had we done that and enacted it, we wouldn't be in as big of a trouble, in as much trouble as we are now, or enacted a comprehensive fiscal policy. We would have put ourselves not in this position. Okay, but here's what happened. Everybody again got angry because all these politicians now have to answer to the big unions and others that support them. What are you doing taking money out of our pockets? How dare you? So we overrode, as the legislature called a joint session and overrode almost all those vetoes, right? And they garnered the votes to overrode almost every one of them. So yes, the governor could come in and do that in the budget, which is probably the first important step, right? The governor sets a budget, and that budget is what the legislature works with. That's the first place to do it. But then, the legislature gets its hacks at it, adds money, does all these different things. And then the governor has another chance to either veto the overall budget or line item. That's happened too. Dunleavy's done that. And then it often gets overridden and put right back in again. So there is a limit to what the governor can do. Now, the governor has other tools, could look at strong arming and vetoing individual bills and things and just make the place a whole chocolate mess, shut it down. There are options, but like all things, Michael, will try to be balanced. There's consequences, right? For every lever you pull, there's something else. So, working the building and trying to figure out a way to make it happen without all that, warfare back and forth would be preferable. But it's not to say that there are not things that a governor that was willing to come in truly with a one-term attitude, right? Because you're right. If you come in and kind of do what's happening like at the federal level right now, the chances are with the powers unions hold in the state, they're going to find somebody and they're going to throw massive money to make sure you're gone. If they can't find grounds to recall you, even if they lie about it, like they did against Dunleavy, right? Because several of the provisions were flat out lies. They didn't care. They're never going to get called for the lies. They'll do anything they can to destroy you if you're going to take money out of their pockets and power. So you just have to acknowledge that you're going to get attacked and they're coming after you for blood, right? So, but it doesn't mean if your attitude is not to go in and doge it, to reduce spending, to get rid of programs that shouldn't exist, to ensure that we try to hold the line on spending and putting the government in a good place, like with parts of a fiscal policy, you could probably get some of it done, probably, but I can't promise it because I've watched the legislature just steamroll Dunleavy on virtually everything. And yes, I know people have their problems with Governor Dunleavy. That's fine. Everybody does. Nobody ever agrees 100%. But you also have to acknowledge that in a lot of those things, Dunleavy did try to do many of these things, and he's been rolled multiple times by the legislature that just doesn't like it. And so, like a children that did not get the gift they wanted, they just, basically sat down and said, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. We're going to have a joint session and override everything. Doesn't always work. So I'm just trying to highlight for people that saying, well, a strong governor could come in and do these things. They could, but they can also get rolled by the legislature.
Sure.
If
sure.
the legislature,
but of all the potentials on the table, that's the one with the biggest potential, right? I mean, really, because
without electing a whole bunch of fiscal conservatives all of a sudden, and we own both chambers with a supermajority and a governor that wanted to do it, you could do it. But without that, where the legislature sits, I mean, Mike, we still have a majority of Republicans, and it's under Democrat control.
Yeah,
both bodies.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to get real far.
Because all those Republicans are just big government people. It's not really a party thing. It's a big government versus small government. And that's what it's about. All right, here we go. Jumping back in.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, we're back. State Senator Mike Shower, our guest. One final segment for the Shower Hour of Power. And we're ready to give State Senator Mike Shower the final word, I guess. This is your segment here to I mean, we've covered a lot of different things, and we've kind of been all over the place talking about different things. But I guess let me set up my thoughts on this final segment, and then you can I'll let you fly free for the last 10 minutes here or so. But my final thoughts are this. Here we sit. This year, fiscal year 25, the year we're in, we already have a $200 million supplemental budget, which is already, we don't have the money to, so there's $200 million in deficit there. Potentially $500 million, maybe even more in deficit next year. And now, of course, The new projections for oil and everything else are showing that the oil could be in the mid 50s, which means the following year, the deficit could be as much as $1.9 billion, maybe even more, depending on where the price actually lands. And so, I mean, when I said earlier that we are broke, I'm not kidding. We are broke. And yet we continue to spend like it's all going to be fine. But even if they take all of the PFD, and even if they drained out the CBR to just the bare minimum for operations, there's not enough money to fix the hole that we're in just the next 2 or 3 years. And so, I mean, when is reality going to smack these people in the face? I guess that's my thought for this final segment.
It's not going to, Michael, because they're not acknowledging that reality, or to them that reality is not an acceptable option. I'm trying to find the right words to describe it. They simply don't care. They're not going to agree to reduce spending, which is where your growth has been, because again, they're trying to shift the narrative from, well, we haven't built more buildings and hired more people. Well, no, but the cost of all of it's gone up dramatically, while the private sector is having to contract to survive. And the government never contracts to survive. The government continues to grow. It just takes more money. But now it's become the stealth taxes. We're going to take every single tax we can find that doesn't directly go after the wallets of Alaskans, because then it's easier to keep growing the government, spending more, right? Because you don't have to show that Alaskans that directly. We're going to go after, other states' tax money, because that will never, ever translate to higher consumer prices, like we said, because they won't get their pound of flesh from those businesses, who will then raise prices anyways, who then will charge Alaskans. But no, we can't do that, right? Or as was said yesterday on the floor of that same debate about that bill, the internet tax bill, for lack of a better term. Oh, if you want bigger PFDs, then vote for this bill. You can't say that. It's not going to go to a bigger PFD. We're reducing the PFD as we speak, because it's all going to be eaten up by government. You just passed a bill out of this body a couple days ago for over $250 million of new education spending, with no real way to pay for it other than to take more of the PFD, which we're probably going to do this year and make it smaller, and or raise taxes. But you see, that's what I'm saying. They're going after an internet tax. Oh, we'll go after that. Tax you. Don't tax you. Don't tax me. Don't tax the man behind the tree. What Keith's sayings he loves so much. But we're going to go after the dreaded and terrible, oil companies, right? We're going to go after more for them. We're going to go after the private sector businesses with, S-corp taxes. We're going to look at every single little tax that doesn't go after actual Alaskans' wallets, because they say, well, see, that's fine. That's fine. That doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't hurt Alaskans. You're right. It doesn't actually hurt investment in this state, because the people with the money look at Alaska and go, you guys can't live within your means. You're going to come after us and whip us around with taxes. So I'm not going to invest anything there, or I'm not going to invest as much as I would have, which means there's going to be less investment, so less growth, so less jobs for Alaskans that pay those wages. But you're right. Yeah, it's not going to hurt Alaskans at all, or they're going to raise the prices of their products regardless of what it is. But you're right. That's not going to hurt Alaskans at all. See the cognitive dissonance it takes to be able to have this kind of conversation where they go, hey, we're going to raise all these taxes, but it's not going to make the cost of living higher for you. Trust me on this one. No, it's just that it's not a direct tax that Alaskans see right out of their wallet like an income or a sales tax, right? That's what it is, Mike. It's the things that are the hidden taxes that they can get away with as long as possible. The one that's been the most interesting, when we really want to talk about, has been the PFD, because the PFD in its own way is a direct tax on the people, because for a lot of people, it is an income thing that, yes, they have learned to rely on, because it's a very helpful thing for the private sector, and for, especially like I said, the poor and the bottom part of the middle class and the senior citizens on a fixed income, et cetera, et cetera. It's been very important for them. It can be a significant portion of their income over the years, right? But we've taken that away from them. And when you take money from somebody, however you look at it, in a lot of ways, in this sense, it could be looked at and viewed as a tax. So when you say, don't worry, we haven't affected the people, yes, we have. We've affected Alaskans by taking money out of their pockets, because we had to instead divert that money to spend it on the government. So we took it out of the people's pockets. But by the way, even those government workers are having it taken out of their pocket. So they get a little more in this paycheck, but they're getting a lot less in the PFD. Every lever we pull has an impact.
Right.
And so this argument, Mike, is very frustrating, because Alaskans just aren't seeing it. but trust me. And now they are saying it. If you haven't been paying attention, you should be watching the press conferences from the House and the Senate majority coalitions, because, brother, they are throwing around the tax word left and right, including income tax. It was Senator Giesel said it a few weeks ago. An income tax is inevitable. In other words, their plan, my friend, is to tax you in every way possible to pay for their government constituency.
You mean
it's coming?
You mean like this?
But we don't yet live in a world where the Alaska people are ready for themselves to invest in their state government.
I mean, again, this is just a nice way of saying it's time you pay your fair share, right?
You haven't paid your fair share, right? That's the equitable statement. They love those statements that sound great to the sound bites on the press and to the various union and other constituencies. It sounds terrific, right? But, the funny thing is I hear this argument about the education debate, right? Because the governor's going to veto it, which is why I asked the question last week on the floor during the debate. Why are we doing this when we already know the governor's going to veto it? He said it on Thursday, and we're passing it out of the Senate on Friday, that $1,000 BSA with no policy. First of all, it's unaffordable as it is. And Mike Cronk will tell you, Senator Cronk, because he's got all these friends in the teacher world, because that's where he came from. He's like, no, we don't need that. It's just Anchorage. Anchorage is the tail wagging the dog. I've heard that so many times behind closed doors in the last few months in this place. Anchorage is the one causing the problems. They got $41 million extra from money from last year they haven't used yet that we gave them one time. It's such a mess there, and so much dishonesty and disingenuousness going around in that debate. But the point goes back to is that, that is we passed $1,000 BSA and no policy. Governor said the day before he was going to veto it. I mentioned that and get called out of order because we don't want to, you can't say what may happen to a bill to influence votes. I'm like, I'm not trying to influence votes. I'm just acknowledging what the governor said less than 24 hours ago. We're passing a bill. We're doing this. Why are we doing it, Mike? So to ask the question, right? Why are we doing it then? You know why we're doing it. We're doing it for the campaign next year. There are people in this building that do not want an education funding bill to pass because they can use it to slam Republicans. Say Republicans hate children. Republicans are anti-education. They'll take those votes, they'll slam them in, little flyers and drop them on doors, and all their union workers will go out there like, the little worker bees that they are, not the good union people. I'm talking about the leadership will force people to go out and do this, right? And they'll go out and hand their lit drops all over the place and say how bad Republicans are. That's what's going on here. They want total control of the legislature with Democrats and not just a majority of Republicans. They want a majority of Democrats and turn this into California. Yeah, it might connect the dots. You can sit back and see what their plan is. And that's what they're doing. And they got a press that dutifully reports this. When we try to say things like, well, what about this? When we ask legitimate questions, well, how are you going to fund it? How are you going to do this? The press doesn't say those things. But everything that every time there's a majority press conference, there's the room is full. The press is lapping it up with all the questions. Once in a while, there's some good questions. There's been some pushback from a couple of the reporters on some of the spending and passing bills that aren't funded, et cetera. So at least I'm seeing some of that.
All right.
But by and large, the press leans very left. So
all right.
What are come on, one more minute.
60 seconds. 60 seconds. That's what I have. Final thoughts, Mike.
You and I can't 60 seconds. Yeah, right. Anyways, summarize. We are a tax and spend session. We are spending far more than we have available. We are going to have to try to tax our way to prosperity, as Churchill said. You cannot. It's like standing in a bucket, pulling yourself up, and we are still just getting started. We got a year to go. So I don't know. Hold on to your hats, Mike. I don't know if we're going to finish before the session. So
no. That's actually a question I was going to get to about special session, because I have a feeling more and more that could be where we're headed here. Which, wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know. At the Senate, I'll give the Senate finance co-chairs some credit here. They actually are really trying hard to rein this in. But Mike, they have been handed a bag of lemons and been told to make lemonade.
Right.
They have been handed a chocolate mess. I don't know, and they don't know how exactly they're going to rein this in. They want to fix it.
All right, we got to go. I just had to mute him. We got to go. We're going to be back tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show. Will Stapp, our guest. All right. Sorry, I had to shut you up, man. Sorry, I got. But yeah, I mean, I had the power. Yeah, a special session. I mean, if they can't get it done in 120 days, I'm not a fan of the members of the Senate Finance Committee, but at least they've had some fiscal discipline. I mean, I could say that's one thing in their favor, I guess, some fiscal discipline. But now they're trying to wrangle all the other crazy big government, spend more people on the other side, and they're having an impossible time.
Yeah, this is the House right now, Mike. The House coalition, I should say, not most of the Republicans in the House, but the House coalition. I mean, Mike, the stuff they're doing, I've never seen. I mean, I'm looking at some of the senior senators, that talk to me, and they're just like shaking their heads like, we've never seen it like this. They have created such a tangled mess that literally the Senate is trying to figure out how they untangle this. And like I said, I will give them credit. The Senate Finance table and the co-chairs, they really are trying to figure out how to untangle this, but they're just being put into, they're given an almost impossible task right now with what the House coalition has done. I mean, the House Senate Finance, or the House Finance table, is such a mess under Josephson. I have never seen so many mistakes made, and it just seems to be no idea what they're doing. Couldn't even pass their own budget out of their own committee.
Right.
So it is. I just never seen anything like this. So the Senate's going to try for sure to figure out how to make this work, at least for this year. But I got to tell you, I mean, honestly, and nothing to do with the time. Yeah, I get it. We stay around and the pressure builds. It's kind of a way of operating, right? I understand how savvy it is, even if I don't like it. But the Senate will get it done if it could. The problem is the House has made such a mess of this right now, and how closely divided they are on things. I don't know if we're not, because we couldn't finish it. I don't know if politically, because of the mess this is right now, that they're going to be able to untangle it in time, because it's not just the Senate can't just go do it, right? Then it's got to go back to the House for concurrence and conference committees and all the different competing interests here. I don't know that we're going to be able to come to an agreement in time to get it done. And then we're still trying to look at education, because we've completely torpedoed this now, because people were very unreasonable and they were playing politics with education funding. And instead of passing a very reasonable amendment, the one we put in with Senator Kaufman, we all worked on that with the governor the day before, and we had a good amendment that would have been passable with lots and lots of policy in it to make it work. Well, they shot that down. So now we're starting over again on that one. And that's a big part, because that's a big priority, trying to get it off the table. So between that and the budget mess from the House, I don't know how we solve this in the next, about 4 weeks at this point. And untangle it enough to make it passable and work. And then what do you do? Yeah. Because of the budget, right? If we don't get this done by the 30th of June, that's the end of the fiscal year. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, Mike. Yeah. They have made a chocolate mess of this. We'll see. But we're going to have plenty to talk about over the next couple of weeks, because maybe we'll pull a rabbit out of a hat. I honestly don't know. And this is all beyond just the fiscal monetary portion we were talking about earlier in the program, because that itself is a whole nother nightmare of taxes and spending and trying to balance the budget and running ourselves out of actual available money to spend outside of the fund itself. So it's we are added to the oil price drop.
Yeah.
I don't know, my friend. I'm ready to go fishing.
It's like trying to make chicken salad out of chicken poop. I mean, really, it's not gonna be appetizing for sure. All right, State Senator Mike Shower, thank you for coming on board, and hopefully you'll keep us abreast of what's going on here over the next.
I think we got somebody for you next week, because I know there's I got a bunch going on, but maybe the week after that. But yeah, we'll try to. Yeah, I think we've been doing a pretty good job, right? At least
no. We've had somebody coming on every week, which is great. I appreciate that for sure. But I mean, this thing is just going to get. This is going to be a hot mess, a hot mess. So,
well, the thing about hot messes with governments, Mike, you know what that does? Rush Limbaugh said it back in the 90s when Clinton got reelected. Is like, I got 4 more years of work ahead of me.
Yeah, no, it's plenty of material. There's no doubt about it. We actually took the presser from the majority last week and we dissected it line by line and comment by comment. It was amazing. We're going to do the same thing with these future press conferences, because like you said, there's some gold in there. We're gonna see.
They're giving you plenty to work with, that's for sure.
All right, we got to go. Thank you so much, Mike Shower. Appreciate you coming on board. We will talk to you again soon.
Have a happy Easter, you guys. We'll see you.
All right, thanks so much, folks. We got to go. We're out of time. The Michael Duke Show coming up tomorrow. Will Stapp for sure. Working on somebody else as well. We'll be back then. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.